Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. So today we're talking about identity and security compliance. So what this is, a Risk Manager Roundtable. So we have Shannon Noonan, who's the president and co-founder of QoS Consulting, Dan Noonan, who's a senior IT global director, Randy, the managing director at Risk to Reward, and of course, Garrett, the CEO here at YouAttest, and I'm Ashley, the director of customer success at YouAttest. Agenda for today. So I just went over the introductions. Garrett's going to go over the State of the Union. We're going to have a panel discussion, a fun demo, and then of course a Q&A at the end.
Hey, Ashley, 1 second. Did we start recording?
Yes, we did.
Okay. That's fine. Thanks, because there will be recording this afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why Ashley's head of customer success, y'all. So there you go.
Okay, go ahead, Garrett.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, and team, we got a real esteemed panel here. So Shannon is well known in the industry as a leader in cyber compliance and privacy. If you have any questions, line those up. Randy is an unbelievable talent that we discovered through YouAttest, and really knows the grits and the details of getting a compliance. He's helping us greatly with our SOC too. And Dan is a hands-on practitioner working under the QoS and is managing the YouAttest product at a customer. So we got the full team here. Okay. So let's talk State of the Union. Yes, and y'all, I'm a certified ethical hacker, so I'm allowed to say the sky is falling because, well, the sky's falling. Okay, it really is around identity. And it's really, the hackers have figured out how to get our credentials. Credential hacks are the leading mechanism of hacks. They just are, okay? Yes, the mechanism they get the credentials, be it phishing or whatever, maybe, and we can argue with that, but the real attacks are coming from the credentials, and then they do privilege escalation through the whole concept of the cyber kill chain, okay? We all know ransomware, you see it all the time. Web and app attacks are the highest, okay? Straight out. And I say that not with any surprise because I'm a web app person, but there's one thing to remember, everyone in the audience, when you're working with your teams. Most cyber guys come, especially if they have a few age of their hairs, come from the network side. They just do. And I know that because I worked at Cisco and I worked at places like Silence, and they're very, very good at L2 to L4 configurations, understanding where hacks are. It's not where the modern hacks are coming from, y'all. They're coming from the web and the apps. That's the real problem, okay? Yeah, and of course, we all know our data is stolen. We'll be more focused on B2B type hacks on this. Where what's being stolen, guys, because it's a gift that keeps on giving, is PII and PHI. Because why just steal one credit card when you can steal the identities and then create multiples, okay? What's really interesting is you break down, in a lot of this is from the Verizon data breach report, but other reports also as well, is misconfiguration. And you know what falls under misconfiguration is permissions. That's a misconfiguration. So we have the team of esteemed Shannon and Randy to help us understand how identity it can make us secure, and then a practitioner like Dan to go into how actually they're doing it in real world. Okay, and the motivation, money, rock and roll. Next. Okay, question time. Now, since we have three esteemed panelists, why have me talk, right? So I'm just going to ask the questions. So why don't we start, Shannon, I'll let you start, then we'll go with the other team members. Let's start this one. What are the major IT regulations, Shannon, that have identity for security? Yes.
Pretty much all of them. So the key regulations that are laws that people need to be aware of around identity are your HIPAA regulations, your Sarbanes-Oxley regulations. SOC 1 and SOC 2 are not regulations, but they support regulations such as security initiatives like your Sarbanes-Oxley and your HIPAA. There is FedRAMP, which requires your management of identity, as well as CMMC, which is being rolled out for DoD requirements. So there's quite a few regulations out there that require teams and companies to manage their identity and ensure that they have no inappropriate access and no one that they do not know as a user.
And Randy, when we talked about this little, you said there's some update we should talk about and mention around the FFIEC.
Sure. Yes, it's more with credentialed authentication. Those that have the admin credential, the advanced credentials, where there is a requirement to do a risk assessment of your users, and those that have the greater risk, those that have greater ability, should be considered for multi-factor authentication. But as part of this, everyone should be doing a risk assessment of their users to kind of identify where the greatest risk is. I would just say that, looking at your users and your user credentials, access security is really security 101. To go along with what Shannon said, I think she covered everything, but it's just security 101. It's the basic level of security.
Yeah, identity is security. I get that. And Dan, as a practitioner, where are you seeing that identity come up in IT security regulations and guidances?
Well, as Shannon said, the two big ones that we see because of the industry we're in, being the healthcare, is SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, because we're public, and HIPAA, and huge on both of those requirements to keep up with who has access, if the access is appropriate, and if access is being maintained properly with everybody, if they're cleaning it up properly, and each of those two regulations are paramount to the company being successful.
Actually, what we should do is probably at the end of this is show a little Sarbanes-Oxley type demo.
Sure.
All good. Rock and roll. Next. Okay. This came up, and this is kind of a foundation of YouAttest, but I want to better to ask you all this question. What are the common requirements across these regulations, especially when it refers to identity? Okay, because we see this, and this is something I've seen as someone that works in this field, is that, okay, if I can get this report, is that relevant to this report, etc. To mix it up, Randy, what are you seeing across the different regulations that are common requirements for identity reporting?
Well, of course, it's always a requirement to recertify your users. Well, I should say at the outset, there's a requirement to have a process so that you know that the user is originally authorized, right? So to have an authentication process at the outset, but then along the way to also have a process to recertify your users so that you know that the users are still authorized as they were at the beginning when they originally requested the access. For example, we commonly see someone change departments, and so their user requirements change. And at that point, they should be reevaluated. And so there is a requirement. Usually the requirement, though, is probably longer than what would be, a good practice. And many require like an annual review, recertification of your users. But I would say that, depending on the application, depending on the environment, it probably should be much more frequent than that, if not continuous. We hear a lot about continuous audit these days, and there's no reason why with a tool like YouAttest that you couldn't do, continual audit of your users.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We did Ashley and I did the IIA show, and that's really what not just the vendors, but the people are speaking of, telling the vendors in the presentations that, hey guys, I don't have a SOX audit. I got to keep in these audits all year round. Dan, how about yourself? Are you seeing that the reports are relevant to what you have to report to in say your SOX and to your other requirements?
Absolutely. It allows us, like Randy was saying, to certify and recertify our users. But he hit the nail on the head there. An annual requirement makes it a very long process. But if we can do it more frequently by using a tool like YouAttest that makes the audit process that much easier, well, then at the end of the year, it's much easier. So
In fact, you
to be able
stepped
to do
into
it.
this one. Ashley, could you change the slide? So what, and Dan, we have you going first. What is the frequency of identity audits required by the regulations? And you as a practitioner, how often are you actually doing them?
Well, they vary by the type of certification you need, but right now we're doing them quarterly. And part of the reason we're doing them quarterly is because of the vast amount that we have to do. Right now, I'm running it's 15 audits through YouAttest on a quarterly basis. Wow. And those audits are for as small as 7 users and as large. Today, I just finished one for 1,008 users. So you can see the issue of running 1,008 users through an audit versus running it through quickly with the YouAttest tool, having that evidence right in front of you and having that tool that can run on a moment's notice rather than the old way of doing it, of contacting the admin then creates a listing and so on and so forth, and the touches that it has to go through as well. So we're doing quarterly audits, and some of them aren't required till annual, but keeping ahead of them is that much easier.
So Shannon, as a risk guru extraordinaire, what are you seeing in the field and what are you recommending for the frequency?
Frequency, it really depends. Most frequency, any administrative access, depending on what you're required to do. We do anywhere from 30 days in regards to like your DoD needs to quarterly, right? So your admins, your elevated access, we're suggesting and or the requirements have you doing it at least on a quarterly basis and sometimes 30 days. Otherwise, if it's your everyday user, small users like 7 users that are not administrators, we're saying at least twice a year. If not, you have to at least do it once a year. In some instances, we suggest at least twice a year because you want to get in there and look at them more frequently. It also depends on, do you have a tool such as this that tells you whether or not you have terminated users in your environment, and can you turn off that access if you see it? So there's other ways to kind of assess that information versus always doing reviews of users. So if you get a flag that you have a terminated user in your environment, if you're reviewing terminated access constantly, then you can turn those off. And I know YouAttest has the ability to look at terminations as well as doing a quarterly user access.
So Ashley, given that you are in contact with all our customers, what are you seeing?
So I see 2 different routes. There's 2 customers that I'm thinking of in particular. One being our biggest customer, right? So they knock this out in 2 weeks. They do this once a year. We have a customer, totally different vertical. However, it's just as complex as our biggest customer, and he uses it once a month. So there's 2 ways of doing it, right? So you can wait once a year, you can knock it out in 2 weeks, or you could do it monthly, and that way it's not such a burden of taking the 2 weeks to do it. So that's what I'm seeing from our current customers is, you have the option, right? You have 2 weeks of just knocking it out, or you just do it monthly and just take it in small bunches to make it easier.
And what's your feeling in the world of compliance, Randy? What are you seeing in your customers, your contacts? And what are you recommending?
Well, to answer the first question, we see quite a range. Actually, to one of the points that Shannon had made, it kind of depends on the risk in the area. And one of the things that we haven't brought up yet is looking at the detail of the privileges of the user. I feel like most everyone, when they talk about this subject, they quite frequently think of removing the terminated user. What they don't always think about is just the review of a user that you're going to keep, but the privileges may change with that user. And so it's very important to look at whether or not they have and continue to have the right privileges, right? To your point, Garrett, earlier about some of the attacks that happen, many of them are inside, and many of the problems are unauthorized transaction, not just unauthorized access, right? And so I guess back to this point, it kind of depends on what kind of a review you're going to do. For example, maybe very frequently you're looking at removing terminated users, but a little less frequently, but maybe more important, is looking at the privileges that the users have and making sure that they continue to have the right privileges. Again, something that the YouAttest application would be very helpful with.
In fact, actually, there was a good prompt to the next one. Can you change the slide? We're going to stay in Randy. So Randy, in your real world work here, okay, are you seeing when the companies say they do an SPR AC-4 and pass it for their SOX or whatever, some type of access, or are we really, is the standard customer without any tool, they're really doing an access review in a way that is quantifying the access privileges of the relevant resources and the relevant users in a way that's making them more secure? Or are you seeing a lot of checkbox work?
Most often not. Most often, first of all, they don't have a good way to document the review that they've done because they're not using a tool. And, I think many of us that are on the call as prior auditors and so on and so forth, we know that if you don't document it, it's as if you haven't done it at all, right? You can't prove that you've done the review without the documentation. But yeah, most of them are not doing the true review. It's a very superficial review. They check the box and they're not really looking at the actual privileges. And what I would say is a basic tenet here is the need to know, right? It's not just whether the users have access that's authorized, but do they have need to know to the access that they've been given, right? One thing that you didn't mention, Garrett, earlier on about things that are currently being stolen, one is intellectual property. That's a big thing and worth a lot of money. And if they have the wrong access, right, they're able to steal intellectual property, and that's a major concern that without the right privilege.
Randy, I know you and both Shannon are big in CMMC and big in whatever, and they're under attack. They're under attack, sure. and we're working with both of you on helping understand it and secure the supply chain. If you want to talk to that, and we'll have the others talk.
Go ahead, Shannon.
So, well, yes. One of the things is I want to tap on something before we get into CMMC sure. that Randy said. I like the point of what he was saying is there's a lot of things under attack, including your IP. The dilemma is some of these organizations do not go beyond the scope of work. So they don't look at user access reviews on a regular basis. One, because it's manual effort. Two, it's just too much work. So they look at only what's in scope. And a lot of times stuff like IP is not in scope for your regulations, right? IP is outside of your requirements. Why do you have to protect IP? Why do you have to protect code? It's not financial. It's not HIPAA. It's not part of the CUI data that's related to CMMC. It's not related to your FedRAMP data. So why are you protecting it? Well, you need to protect it as your organization. So it comes back down to that point is, are we looking at everything? And do you have the ability to really look at everything? And tools are the best way to do this, as well as it reminds everyone when you can look at the whole list of users and say, does everyone need access to this environment, whether they have appropriate access because they're active or granular, should they have that access? But regulations like CMMC are requiring you to look at that detail. Should they have this access for their role? And should they have access to this data so that it's really challenging people, right? Do they need access to data? So as you start getting more and more granular and you're looking at data points, it's really making you assess in totality what the organization has access to and what roles have access to that data. Okay, so it's a different mindset almost.
Yeah, and I was going to, and I'm going to throw Dan in this in a second, but I'll stay on you, Shannon. So there's one thing you've been saying. You've been saying, okay, great, we got to do a better job of these, and you seem to be leading your customers into a more frequency. Who has the right, or who can tell the company, hey, these half-baked access reviews aren't helping anyone, and the frequency isn't helping anyone? Is that y'all, Shannon and Randy? Are you the external telling them that? Or is it someone who's more on the internal, Dan working in there? Or how does security improve? And who-
All of the above, Garrett, all of
Yeah.
the above. But it's really having that advocate that's going to support you, because
Right.
these exercises are time consuming, especially if they're manual. So it's getting away from the manual efforts and finding ways to automate it, such as using a tool like YouAttest that's telling you the answers, trying to figure out how to implement something that makes it easier for the team, so that they aren't going to sit there and cringe as they're about to go into a user access review, or validating that they don't have terminated users in the environment, or that people don't have inappropriate access to data. So
Shannon, I mean, you've been on both sides, because I worked side by side with you in a company together. We're at Silence.
Yes.
Disclosure, great company, all that kind of stuff. Shannon was leading the privacy practice, and I was building a product and telling her what is up. Where do you see yourself more able to control or advise a company in the external role, internal role, or you just contrast that?
We were lucky because I was able to advise at Silence, but we were a security company. So
Yeah, good point.
branding wise, we couldn't have an impact. So security, it was top of the line. But sometimes at organizations, where do I see it? They bring in contractors to tell them that they're not doing something right, because one, they don't have the expertise internally, or two, they're second guessing themselves. So a lot of times they do go to third parties to give them real live experience and exposure from all that they're doing and seeing out there. But some of it's training too. So if they trained people and they had the top-down approach, they could probably have internal people also say those. Because at the end of the day, you need the internal people to buy it. So you need your
Right.
CISOs,
Yeah.
your CEOs, your CFOs to really sit there and say, yes, we need to do a better job here. And I'm also even seeing it coming down from boards.
Nice.
So boards, audit committees are asking the questions and saying, what are we doing here to do better and make sure that this access is restricted and that we're not getting breaches and ransomware and so on and so forth.
And Randy, where are you seeing who's driving in your world? The
Well,
internal, external, both, all the above?
Again, it goes back to the size of the organization, but larger organizations, in fact, have a requirement to have a security officer, right? So New York, California, they have requirements to have a security officer, and the authority really should come from there to make sure that this is happening. And so what normally happens, I think you guys have all kind of touched on it, but many times the organization will listen to an outside consultant more than they will to an inside person. But the authority really should come from the security officer. The organization should have either like some of the things that we get involved with is being a virtual information security officer that gets outsourced to us. And then, they listen to us to provide that kind of guidance. But it really should.
And Randy, I was just going to go there. Is that how people use you then? Like a security officer says, "Hey, help me here. I know they need help," and you give them the reports and then help them contrast his environment to the rest of the world.
Absolutely, but we will work in coordination with internal folks. The data owner needs to be a big part of this, right? Because the data owner is going to help determine different things about classifying the data, classifying the access, what kind of access should you have. So, we'll provide some oversight, but then it'll get divided like YouAttest has the ability to do amongst different supervisors who really know the user best, right? And so they should be the ones, but the oversight would come from the security, the information security officer who can, maybe get things started and ensure overall that it gets done.
Perfect. And Dan, just because we went on a tangent in a good way on where you're seeing the influences to affect and to improve security policy, is that coming from internal or external in your real world life?
Well, it's a combination of what Shannon and Randy said. A lot of it depends on the size of the company.
Okay.
And unfortunately, a lot of the times I've seen where the influence is after the fact, after an issue happens or something, then all of a sudden senior management gets involved, that they don't have a Shannon or a Randy there to tell them, hey, here's best practices. But now they have to reach out, but it's at the emergency basis now. Now they're rushing to do something that they didn't know they would or could do, and it was because of an incident. So that's the influence I've seen an awful lot of, especially in the small company world, as working with a lot of small companies out there. and to do, I've been in the SOX world for a very long time. And unfortunately, SOX is for public companies. And at that point, it's way too late for them because now they're in trouble.
I seen the whole thing about a push for SOX for cybersecurity, but yes, as a loan. And I have to say, as a study of cultures, that's the American way. Respond. I'm going to stay on you. Yeah, not prepare, respond. Stay on this. And we're going to talk to you, Dan. Actually, if you go to the next slide, because you're saying, because we are being hacked. We all know that and whatever. And I want to stay on you, Dan, and ask you, what do you think is the biggest problem out there? Why is it? Is it resources? Is it companies' priorities? Is it our nature to only respond after attack? Is it that the companies have the wrong technology? We have to call out any, but just in general,
It's a little bit of everything, and that sounds easy to say, but in a lot of companies, especially the small companies like I referenced, resources, wearing multiple hats. Priorities are, where's the next fire? And the technology is, well, nobody wants to spend any money to do anything. They're doing it from the seat of their pants. And what they don't realize is that getting technology and getting a tool helps the priorities, helps the resources, and lessens the work on them. So that's what they're lacking a little bit of everything. Everything's do more with less. Going all the way back to my days in the military, you do more with less, and so everything is a trickle down effect here.
Any thoughts on this, Shannon?
Same, right? I'm seeing lean teams everywhere. People are suffering from the lean teams, trying to figure out how to automate. They either don't know how to do it, have to bring someone in. So there's definitely a resource constraint here, which you can only look at so many things. So why not get the low hanging fruit and manage your access, right? That it gets the minimal piece of it. Doesn't mean it gets everything, but it minimizes some of the risk by just managing that and reviewing it constantly.
And change the slide, please, Ashley. I'm going to jump to Randy. So, Randy, what's the consequences of this? Dan and Shannon both said that, hey, where we are, Americans, many of us on this call and overseas tend to try to do more with less, try to, get away with what we can. You said it yourself. Right. Access reviews are often done as check boxes. What's the consequences?
Well, it can be pretty large. I saw a statistic that said on average of having a hack like this, one individual hack can cost a company on average of about $870,000 per incident. And so it can be pretty vast, and not to mention
pretty big YouAttest license, Ashley?
Yeah.
If you're in a regulated environment, then on top of that, you can also have fines, or, like I do a lot of work with banks, and they can be subject to, even a cease and desist if they're not careful. If they have a pretty large breach, the FDIC or the OCC can even come in and shut them down. Wow,
that's pretty intense. Shannon, your thoughts? What's the biggest impact of these of lack of diligence on these audits, especially in the identity world?
The biggest risk, people thinking it's a hypothetical situation. Just like you said, people are being hacked. So instead of living that this is not going to happen, it's understanding that it will happen if you don't do the right things, and which will lead to fines, right? If you get personal data hacked, you're going to have a fine. Depending on where you are, it could be quite significant, right? If you have European data that's hacked, you've got significant fines coming your way, depending on the country, right? Same with HIPAA data. If it's hacked, you might get a slap on the wrist the first time. The second time, someone could go to jail. So it's not just fines that you're worried about in some of these instances. It's actually jail time, as well as other situations if you're not taking care of it.
That's right.
Lawsuits, right? You got to think about a lawsuit if you're, depending especially if it's HIPAA data, you could be subject to a pretty big lawsuit.
Yep.
That's right, Randy. I did a webinar with one of your cohorts, Robert, and we just went through 3 pages of the latest HIPAA fines and et cetera. Dan, any comments on that in the real world?
Usually, as a result of somebody having an issue and the fines and the hacks coming, that's when I end up coming in the door. And so I'm kind of a resulting factor in a lot of times to fix the issues and to come in and work with clients after they've been fined and after they have a hack that causes a fine or something to that effect. So
got it. So Ashley, enough of telling the world the sky's falling. Let's show a better way how to do identity audits. Okay,
Sounds good.
allow me to be presenter, or maybe I'll make myself presenter. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, it's this Zoom tool. No, Ashley and I are going to run a real world demo. There we go. And it's real important that we're doing this to show you that it's not going to take a CCIE, and it's not going to take a lot of training. We get these up and running in minutes. We get access reviews up in minutes and roll these out in half a day. Okay, so you're good to go. So am I showing my screen, Ashley?
Yep.
Am I showing the right screen?
Yep. You're
Thank you.
good to go.
Perfect. So let me connect to a data source. Okay. And this is what we do. I'm going to be the risk manager with most of you are out there. And then Ashley's going to be a manager that actually is going to do the review. I'll put that one behind because that's what we do. We won't have to switch screens. Okay. So I'll set you up that way. Okay. Here it is. Let's get going. Okay. Connect to the directory. Give it a name. Okay. Call this finance 201B. Fine. Whatever. And then I'll set when I want it done. I'm going to say, I want this done now. Okay. This is really important. So I'm going to do what we've talked about, Dan, a SOX audit, rock and roll. Here it is. I'm going to do an application audit of this finance app. Okay. It came up to me because I connected to AAD, which is literally a 3-minute integration through SAML. Other ones are OIDC, but AAD is Azure AD is SAML. And this is it. So what's happening now is YouAttest across the cloud is reaching across to your tenant and then securely through the SAML OIDC pulling the information. And then all the automation is done through us. What do I mean by automation? The process of doing an access review is what? Is quantifying who the manager is, and Ashley's going to be an manager for this, and then sending Ashley relevant communications. And I didn't just say email because now we do both email and Slack. Okay, customer wanted this all through Slack, rock and roll. Well, we have these templates that we speak. We speak to Ashley, the reviewer, and gently, or you can modify this, say you need to do a review. Okay, and Ashley's leading a project right now that has how many reviewers, Ashley?
I mean, there's 10,655 reviewers, but more importantly, there's almost 1 million roles.
And that's why you need Ashley as your customer success manager. She knew not just that it was 10,000. It was good. That was good. 10,655. Okay. And the product is designed to send to these 10,655 these types of reports that you can change and modify, put your logo on to make it look like it's not from a spammer. And then this is what's really powerful. How often do you want to, quote unquote, nag them? Before the audit? And what's your message after? And how often is that message? Okay, so rock and roll. Show that. Now I'm going to go back to the audits and take a look at what we have here and rock and roll. The finance audit is ready. I am still risk manager. Okay. Risk manager means I don't certify anything. I've seen that, and that's where I love working with Shannon and Dan and Randy. They know that me, the risk manager, certifying anything is silly. That's not a real audit. What I have to do is delegate. Now I can do that manually through the GUI. I can, delegate each one of these and say, hey, is Cher really, should he really have access to this? Well, let me, delegate to the manager. Or what our customers pretty much all do is they like the auto delegate, where it says, risk manager, you don't have the right and nor should you be reviewing the audit. Okay. Bing, someone just got an email. Ashley as ad manager, take it away.
All right, I just requested remote control access.
Oh, and I'll hit reproof. There you go.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm coming in as ad manager, so I'm the reviewer. So all I need to do is click on my email, which is timestamp 10:35. So this is the latest email that we got. So literally, all I have to do here, click this hyperlink. It's going to automatically log me in because we have SSO enabled.
That's a really good point. The product prides itself by integrating into Okta and Zero ID and Jump Cloud. And not only do you get to see the roles, but more importantly, this is Ashley's experience. You know? Yes.
Okay.
Let me get you to the audit. I'll get you.
Yeah.
There, okay. And here's your audit right there. And right here.
Okay, perfect. So when I log in, this is what I'm going to see. I'm going to see a snapshot of what Garrett as the risk manager sees. I'm not going to see all that detailed information that he saw. These are the two people that report to me, Kyle and Bob. So that's all I need to worry about. So you can see I haven't done anything yet, right? I've just opened this up. So pending, no progress. So I can individually go into each person and I can certify that everything's good. I can revoke if, let's say, Kyle does not have the appropriate access, or let's say Garrett as the risk manager, as the manager, he delegated me Kyle, and he shouldn't be. He actually reports to someone else. He reports to Sue. I can delegate to Sue.
And she
Same
can
thing
read
with
it.
Bob.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do here is I can see that everything's good to go with these two employees. So I'm going to check here. I'm going to click these three dots and I am going to certify that everything's good. So I got my green bar. So that means I'm good to go. If I want to check it, I go over here, look, completed, certified. My job is done. So it took me just a matter of maybe 1-2 minutes. So I'm all done. So then we'll go back to the risk manager, Garrett, and show you what he sees.
And that's it. That's how we can make you a hero. The risk manager is an internal or external, right? Is that Ashley and I were just at the Dallas IIA show in Institute of Internal Auditors. The keynote speaker, a board member, John Stagel, got up and said, if I could do it over again in my career, I would be more empathetic to the rest of the company, that they have day jobs. And manager that Ashley plays has a day job. That we should have to make it easier on her. And if we make it easier, the results we get them is better and more efficient and quicker. And let me just go to this because Ashley says we have some questions, but let me hit refresh and look what the product did for us. Okay. So one of the managers actually did a review. So look at that. These are done. And in real time, we did this intentionally. There's a other set of a manager that has to do his review, and we see whatever, and a product will automatically tell them at the end of the day, if you set that those person have to they have to do the reviews as well. Okay, rock and roll. Okay, should we take the questions there, Ashley? We can show the info page and all that. I'll stop sharing my.
Yep,
screen.
if you could stop sharing, and then I'll share my screen, and then we have some questions that we'll go through.
Rock and roll.
One moment, please. All right. All right, so questions. So the first question, does YouAttest have a SOC 2 certification? And I'm going to take that one because I'm super excited about it. And I'll let Randy add if he'd like to. We will, hopefully next week, we're working with Randy on our SOC 2. It's been a ton of work. We're super proud. So we will have a SOC 2 in the next couple of weeks. I don't know, Randy, if you wanted to add anything to that.
I would just fully agree with you. I mean, we're right in the process and
Cool.
it's moving along very well. And yep, things are in good shape.
Proud to say it's a SOC 2 type 2, y'all. It's a real one. I mean, we did a full assessment and a full work and a full 6-7 months of preparation. Okay, next.
Okay, so Shannon, I have a question for you. So looking at an IPO, where would I start with my stocks?
Say that again, looking at what? I missed the first part.
Looking at an IPO.
An IPO, where would I start with stocks? Okay, well, IPOs are different because you need to understand whether you're being bought or I change that. You're being bought and becoming IPO and becoming a public company, or you're going and becoming a public company through the IPO process. So in SOX, you need to assess all of your financial controls on both the financial side as well as the IT side to make sure you've got a lot of things in place. So it's everything from access to change management to understanding all your financial manual controls. So, I mean, this is a pretty big question. So if you really want to go through the depths of it, I'm here, but IPO is a pretty intense process and access is a small portion of it, and making sure that you have the right roles assigned to people and that only certain people have access to certain data.
Yeah, it's pretty involved. That's a good something to engage Shannon and the team directly. Keep going.
Okay, Dan, what type of audits and or reports do you generate with YouAttest?
Thanks.
Well, it's been a slow burn, and we're working our way up. But initially, we started with the Okta SAML apps that we have implemented, and we've rolled those out. And to touch on something that you showed earlier, it was kind of funny. I was sitting here giggling as you were doing it, because I've been demoing this for some of the senior people at the company I'm working with. And, they were all, I got to learn another app. And after 5 minutes in there, they were running on themselves. In fact, I sent them the email assigning them to the audit before. And by the time I called the meeting, they had already been in there and learned the app. So they were way ahead. But one of the other things that they love that I seen you talk about, and it sounds so simple, but it's so hard. And Ashley talked about the very large user base auditing. Well, I'm auditing smaller ones, but up until now, they were going to do single people auditing all the users. So one application owner auditing 1,000, 2,000 users. It just doesn't get the depth of experience to audit those users. So I showed them how we can delegate. And it was like nirvana. They all of a sudden, I can delegate to all the managers. Are you kidding me? And it's just we're doing that. And so now they want to delegate 1,000, it's not going to be 1,000 managers, but at a different level. So they're absolutely loving it. And then the same thing with the simple thing of delegating to individual users. I'm not the right person to look at that person's access. That should be Joe. And they click on the box and they send it over to Joe.
Change the demo. Is that I should play risk manager and Ashley, because that's what you do in the real world. You set it up for people, but you're not reviewing. You are having the actual reviewers review with the product. Yeah.
So the simple things that you're showing have been huge to the user base, and even the resulting reporting of those audits that I've been doing. It shows everything. The audit report shows who audited, when the audit started, when it was audited, and all of it, click and print, and it's in a PDF format to be able to give it to the auditors. So that's going to be a huge thing. And that's how the initial ones. I'm driving some interest now, and it's been accepted very, very widely on the CSV audits as well. And we're going to be doing some Delta audits on those CSV audits. And what I mean by a Delta audit is that they'll look at the same data monthly and then be able to just change and submit the CSV and then look at what the changes are from month to month to month. So it makes life a whole lot easier for the folks on the Delta audits. They're able to be able to see the individuals who have been added or deleted. And the last thing that we've been looking at is the triggers and putting, especially in the admin areas, we've been putting triggers on the groups where the admins live. And as a result of having that, the people who manage the admin areas know who's been added immediately or know who's been deleted immediately. So it's not something that they have to wait on.
Perfect.
Great stuff. Got a whole lot of material for more webinars. Good stuff.
Randy, question for you. What's the future of CMMC 2.0 and self-assessment? So will an external assessment become mandatory, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think that, sure. I mean, that's kind of the wave of the future, right? So hopefully they make more progress on it. One would have thought that they would have had a little more progress made. We keep waiting and waiting. They make a change here and there, but in the end, the requirement is coming, and organizations are going to have to follow the CMMC. And if they're not ready, they're gonna have issues, and this is going to be a big part of it. As Shannon started, this is a very basic requirement to make sure that your users and that they're all certified, and that is a big beginning part of CMMC.
Yeah, Shannon, you were shaking your head. Do you have any extra thoughts on that one before we exit?
Yeah, no, basically, as Randy said, it's coming, so be ready. They're still in the self-assessment phase. You're supposed to actually, and I've got to get more details on this, but you're supposed to be submitting your self-assessment if you have CUI data come December. So it's coming, and there are some requirements for you to have a third party out there doing it. So it just depends on the level that you're getting completed. So there are organizations already going through the process to become CMMC certified, as it is required as part of the RFP. So it's a matter of time. It's going to happen.
There you go. Oh, and if you can find the chat, Randy and Ashley, Randy and Shannon, put your information in there. I forgot to add to the slide. Or if anyone needs to reach them directly, just write info. We'll direct you, whatever. Okay, Ashley, why don't we take one more?
Okay, last question, and it's for you, Garrett. So
Oh, there you go.
what about resources that are not in Okta or Azure AD?
Yeah, nice, because I was showing the Azure AD demo, and our friend Dan talked about the integration with Okta, but Dan also mentioned CSV, common separated values. Okay, what is relevant is the product and taking the upload from any resource. And huge project on CSV, because they're taking it from HR, they're taking it from wherever, and then they want the automation, they want the Garrett and Ashley demo, they want to have 10,000 admins go out and push it out. Okay, or we just in our V3 release of this summer, now we have a full API, which we have people working on, and customers and partners working on, and integrating their resources as well. So yes, we have the identity stores records, we have Azure, we have Okta, we have AD, we have Jump Cloud, which is a lot of fun. We have that stuff integrated, but we also have a full CSV, and we also have a full API.
Perfect. Those are all the questions. Yep, those are all the questions that I have. So thank you, Shannon, Randy, and Dan, for joining us. I appreciate it. And thank you to our audience for coming to another YouAttest webinar.
All the best. Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Special
Thank
thanks
you.
to our panel. All the best. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good day. Take
Bye.
care.